Good morning once again to everybody in this honorable house. First, let me give respect to the Spirit of God, which you lead in charge and head of my life. Let's read this scripture we're going to take from 2 Timothy chapter 1. Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ by the commandment of God our Savior and the Lord Jesus Christ, which is our hope. And to Timothy, my son, my only son, in faith, grace, and mercy, and peace from God our Father, the Lord Jesus Christ, our Lord. First, let me drop this nugget before I pray this morning. We know the story, some of the other Bible scholars about Paul. You know, Paul's name was Saul before he became Paul. Paul was one of the greatest apostles. But I want to jump this in here. Paul said that if you can't maintain yourself like me, it's better to marry than to bury. And like me, that's why they're married, because I can't maintain myself. And you know that everybody that I do, I always said that what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. For better, for worse, for rich and poor, in sickness and health. Listen, for better, for worse. Figure out, so what you're talking about. Figure out, marriage is on wood, and your bed is under fire. And let us bow your heads. Lock your chin on your chest, find something to do something. Father God, in the name of Jesus, God, we come before you on this day, God, the 16th day, God, of this month, this day that we've never seen before. Father God, in the name of Jesus, God, we ask you, God, to intervene upon us right now, God. God, be with us right now, God, in these sessions. We come against everything, God, what don't look like you. We bind up everything, we loose down every fallen angel, every warlock spirits, God. We come against it right now in the name of Jesus. God, we ask you, God, to breathe fresh upon us right now, God. We realize, God, without you, we cannot do nothing. We'll be like a ship without a sail, tossed in and driven. We thank you, God, for what you're about to do. We give you all the praise, God, and all the glory. For thy name, God, is worthy to be praised above all other names. Let everybody say, Amen. Thou hast taught us to say, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and your glory, forever. Amen. May the peace of God be with you, that passes all understanding.
Yeah. Honorable members, when this House suspended its sitting last week, we were at statements and communications by ministers. The Prime Minister had just completed his statement in the mid-year budget report, and in so doing, he had moved a resolution that the report be adopted by the House. The motion was seconded, at which point the business of the House was suspended. We shall now proceed at this point. It has been moved and seconded that the midterm budget report be adopted by this House. As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador.
Morning. I can read it. Morning, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am privileged to rise to open this debate on the mid-year budget statement, which I tabled last week. The statement provides a look at the administration and progress of the nation's finances. This year's statement is particularly, put that right here. This year's statement is particularly noteworthy because it is the first time in several years that it is being produced without the constraints of the emergency orders. The statement provides the Bahamian people with information about the government's fiscal performance against the budget targets at the midpoint of the fiscal year. As you know, we entered office in mid-September, so much of this report covers activities of the previous administration. Madam Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, our mid-year budget statement spoke to observations on current microeconomic conditions and reported on progress to date regarding public revenue, capital and current expenditure, and public debt and borrowing. I also described how our new approach to the COVID-19 pandemic has had a positive impact on the country. Free testing, the end of emergency orders, the reopening of schools. These are all contributing to a brighter outlook for our country. The period covered by the statement only covers 2.5 months of our time in office, mid-September through December. So it is too early for the full effects of many of our policy changes to have manifested itself. However, many early indicators suggest grounds for cautious optimism. Bahamians are overwhelmingly welcoming the fresh approach to our new administration. There is a newfound sense of hope that their lives and the life of the country will improve. We are starting to dig out from the rubble. Our economy is finally moving in the right direction. We are hard at work implementing our blueprint for change, the policy platform which includes our economic plan for our COVID action plan and our COVID action plan. At the end of October last year, a month or so after we were elected, we presented a supplementary budget in order to reallocate government resources to priority areas, prioritize immediate relief for the Bahamian people, and lay the foundation for a robust recovery of the Bahamian economy. 6 months in, Deputy Speaker, we have made important progress. We ended the emergency orders. We ended the curfews. We have conducted tens of thousands of free COVID tests. We have distributed hundreds of thousands of free medical grade masks. We ended the expensive travel health visa for Bahamians. We hired more nurses. We paid healthcare workers what they were owed. Our hotels are filling up and our businesses are open. We've got our children back in school and employees back to work. Mr. Deputy Speaker, competence and compassion in government matter. But this is only the beginning. So much more work remains. We look forward to announcing significant new policies and new investments in 2022. We can't afford to stand still. In a time of climate change, geopolitical turmoil, and global pandemics, we need to adapt, to innovate, to grow, to diversify, and to transform. Take prices. Global prices have been rising as demand outstrips supply. The Russian invasion of Ukraine puts upward pressure on oil and food prices, and COVID outbreaks in China are having an impact on manufacturing. Therefore, for Bahamians, the effect of the reduction in VAT to 10%, which falls just outside this reporting period, has been blunted by rising prices caused by global economic conditions. Mr. Deputy Speaker, many Bahamian families are still struggling. 11,000 households are currently receiving food assistance. We know we need to reach more. We need to be flexible and continue to adjust to public finances in ways that maximize opportunity and minimize negative impacts for Bahamians. In addition, the technical teams at the Office of the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Social Services are preparing to introduce a nationwide RISE program, which will provide substantial benefit to many Bahamian families. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I do not propose to once again recite the full details of our fiscal position in relation to revenue and expenditure, levels of borrowing, and the deficit. I will, however, just draw attention to few salient facts. In respect of revenue, actual and forecast improvements in revenue are being driven in part by more efficient collection of existing tax liabilities, not by the introduction of new taxes. We anticipate that with the lowering of the rate in January 2022, VAT receipts will continue to improve in subsequent periods. In respect of expenditures, I am proud that two key components of that spending relate to putting right some of the unconscionable decisions of the past. We have reinstated the promotions and raises owed to the many hard-working public servants who, for the past 2 years, protected us after Dorian and during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have increased pension and gratuity payments to provide a cost of living adjustment to our many retired public servants now living on a fixed income. Mr. Deputy Speaker, since June 2021, the ratio of debt to GDP has fallen from a full 100.2% to 96.4%. And the net fiscal deficit has also been reduced compared to the same period in the previous year. In addition to the direct benefit to our economy, these indicators improve our relationship with creditors, investors, and members of the business community. And, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there's no question that the government's interaction with international creditors is yielding results. Major public and private international institutions clearly have a renewed sense of confidence in the government of the Bahamas. The government recently entered a repurchase agreement with Goldman Sachs International, which is a visible demonstration of this confidence. Under this agreement, security assets are traded for cash, with an obligation to purchase the securities back in 2 years' time. It is important to note that the rate of interest on this repo is 2.4%. This contrasts incredibly favorably with the bond issue that was undertaken by the previous administration just over a year ago, where the rate of interest was 8.95%. The difference in confidence expressed in our administration versus the previous administration could not be starker. They were charged interest of 8.95%. We were charged interest of only 2.4%. Mr. Deputy Speaker, lower costs means less burden on and for the Bahamian taxpayer. Speaker, in my statement, I referred to the pre-election report released by the previous administration in August last year, as is required by law. In part, the law mandates the government to disclose its account of arrears, unpaid bills, and other unbudgeted financial obligations. I'm frankly astonished when the members opposite appear to feel no shame or remorse over the fact that their report failed to disclose almost $1 billion in significant liabilities and unfunded obligations of the government. Why? What was the purpose of not disclosing these obligations as required by law? It's hard to draw any conclusion other than the fact that this was a shameless pre-election attempt to disguise the truth and the dire state of the public finances. Mr. Deputy Speaker, my report in the mid-year budget referenced several ongoing investigations into the public finances. I'm very aware that during the previous administration, a great many investigations were announced and then never referred to again. Whatever facts the government uncovered, assuming the investigations actually took place, stayed hidden from the public. I believe this added greatly to the anger and cynicism of our people. Let me be clear. In my administration, we intend to find answers, and we intend to make those answers public, whatever they may reveal. As leader of the opposition, I asked many times I asked for a transparent reporting of pandemic spending. It was never provided. At the start of the pandemic, anti-corruption organizations like Transparency International warned that some governments would seek to use the health emergency to bypass ordinary procurement rules. It would allow them to hide their spending decisions. I drew this to attention on many occasions in opposition. And I regret to say that this has happened here in our own country. Who was getting how much? And for what purpose? And under what terms?
The chair
There
recognizes
were many opportunities for the previous government to do the right thing.
Is this a point of order?
And explain the hidden spending.
1 second. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, member for Cat Island.
No, I'm not yielding. This is point order.
Thank you very much. Chair, thank you very much.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, member said that we are hiding finance or spending. That would imply some degree of corruption. I would suggest that the member do the investigation. If he find any degree of corruption, my position is straight. If he find me guilty, charge me, lock me up. If he find other members, do the same. My position is straight. I am totally anti-corruption. Investigate and let the chips fall where they may.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Cat Island.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, we would not have been having this conversation if he would have done his job and followed the law. If he had followed the law when he was the competent authority, as we were pointing out to him while in opposition, I have many statements that I made to him. right? Anti-corruption. I reminded him on many occasions that Transparency International warned about the fact that the pandemic would be used as a veil to hide spending. And I'm saying I have discovered that is what's happening now. Hidden spending. And you should have done your job. Now, Mr. Speaker, as I said, there were many opportunities for the previous government to do the right thing, to reveal and explain what I call the hidden spending.
Yeah.
What's the point of order?
Point of order. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I repeat, if the member thinks or suspects that there are hidden spending, I urge the member to investigate on any irregularities or any semblance of corruption. Charge the individuals, including myself, because I am totally against corruption. I am totally against it. Just totally transparent, do the investigation, and let the chips fall where they may. If not, then let's move on and tell the Bahamians what they are about to do about the recession and the cost of living and gas and food expenses that they face today. They want to hear, how are you going to
Honorable member, you will have a chance to debate. You will have a chance to debate. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island.
I'm hearing him saying he's against anti-corruption. He ain't for corruption, and he ain't this, and he ain't that. But I can tell you, right, and I will not say anything. If he was against all those things, what I'm going to be talking about in a short while, I would not have to be talking about. Because if he had done his job, he did not do his job, and he knew why he wasn't doing his job. So, Speaker.
One second.
And they will fall when they
One
make.
second. This is a debate, but I'm sure this is going to be a heated debate. But let's respect each other and time on the floor.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's not going to be heated. You see, Mr. Speaker, when I was threatened, I didn't call the police, you know. When the member threatened me, I didn't call the police. But when somebody asks people to come and see who can get that, let's watch to see what can happen, the police was called. Bring it on. I will always tell you that. So,
The chair recognizes the
there were
honorable
many
member.
opportunities, Mr. Speaker.
Is this a point of order, Kalani?
There were many opportunities.
Honorable member.
There were many opportunities, Mr. Speaker.
Listen,
Deputy Speaker.
One second. Is this a point of order, Kalani?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
The member said I called the police. Mr. Speaker, it is true that I wrote a letter to the commissioner. What is also true What is also true is that such letter was leaked to a PLP social media group. And it could not have come from even my lawyer, because I made amendments to the letter that nobody knew other than I. But yet it appeared on social media.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Mr. Speaker, I'm greatly concerned about the grandstanding we're seeing from the member for Kalani. This is a serious debate. We want to get on with the business of the country. If the member has a legitimate point of order, I believe we ought to entertain it. But, in my view, Mr. Speaker, we haven't heard one yet. And we really would like to proceed with a very serious debate, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful if you would oblige.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island.
Thank you, Member for Exuma. Let me just repeat. There were many opportunities for the previous government to do the right thing, to reveal and explain the spending. When they did not seize the opportunities, I say the Bahamian public drew their own conclusions. As Minister of Finance, making a mid-year report on the budget, I am ethically bound to report on any matters which are likely to affect the performance of the public finances. And it would be seriously remiss of me if I did not do that. Therefore, on the several investigations which are ongoing into the conduct of the public finance in the recent past, I have to at least say what's going on. Unlike them, I'm going to let the public know. Before I offer more of the specifics of the three programs I highlighted, that is the food program, the Parks and Beaches Authority, and the Travel Health Visa, I wish to highlight some of the disturbing commonalities that give great concern in respect to the three. As with most democracies, we have a structure of checks and balances that exists in the public service. This system makes it difficult for an individual or small group of individuals to act without layers of oversight and accountability. In the programs which I've highlighted, and let me repeat them, the food program, the Parks and Beaches Authority, and the Travel Health Visa program, the decision was made to set up the structures outside the public service. That is, outside the system of accountability. Worse still, these structures were staffed by people who had no particular competence to run those structures. And there were little to no checks and balances. These were in violation of a number of laws, regulations, and sensible good practice. Mr. Deputy Speaker, vast sums of public money will run through these structures, together totaling hundreds of millions of dollars. And each of these structures had abysmally poor record keeping concerning what monies were taken in and how the money was spent. Again and again, I warned repeatedly about the concentration of power into one set of hands during my stint in opposition. One set of hands, the competent authority, and the lack of transparent reporting and accountability. Those who were there would have heard me and would remember. I noted that the administration had handed over some of the basic functions of government to their wealthy friends, and I asked why. When I sat over there, you who were there would remember. Why did they pay a private company to handle national insurance funds when you have a public service whose job is just to do that? Why was the government paying a private company to receive custom payments when we have a public service whose job is just to do that? Time and again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, public officials in critical positions were replaced by individuals with no real administrative experience. The institutions such as BAIC, Parks and Beaches, the Food Task Force, the Disaster Reconstruction Agency, just to name a few. There are also examples where political appointees on boards replaced a number of executives or were put in leadership positions in the same entity over which they were appointed as directors or board members, and those persons had no apparent qualifications. Bahamas here, BPL come to mind. In the case of BPL, the abrupt departure of the recruited, experienced, and qualified Bahamian chief operating officer was never explained. Before I continue, I mentioned it, I want to say that it was brought to my attention what the Honourable Member for Kalani was quoted in the Tribune as saying. He couldn't wait to get to Parliament too. Let me be clear. The words food assistance are not themselves so sacred that the Bahamian people do not deserve answers as to how tens of millions of their tax dollars were spent. The good work and good intentions of some don't provide justification for the malfeasance of others. And let me warn you, the best that can be said for the member of Kalani who oversaw and then obscured the spending is that he was aggressively incompetent. And his colleagues, see three of them sitting in front of me now, who cheered him on every step of the way, deserve scrutiny as well. It's hard to imagine how some of them walk upright since no backbone was in evidence during all those long months of emergency orders. They could have followed the facts, asked the tougher questions, upheld propriety and the law. They could have defended the interests of the nation, but they didn't. Let me add a little more detail about the food program. Now, when I spoke last week, I called no names. Since then, the chairwoman has appeared in the press following my statement last week, challenging elements of my statement. I will now speak more fully to some of the facts. Mrs. Susan Holowesco Larson, the chairwoman of the National Food Security Task Force, was hired by the government and paid a salary of $7,000 a month and or $1,750 per week. Did we know that? Did anyone expect that? She was given some $53 million to spend. $53 million. But it appears that she was not required to report to anyone on how that money was spent. That's the way it appears. In addition to her salary, I wonder if he listened. In addition to his salary, while setting up the program, Mrs. Susan Holowesco Larson indicated to people on a Zoom call that she was also reserving 8%. That's 8%. 8% of what was being given to her for administration fees. And she's going to spend, and then she had a startup cost of 1%, a startup cost. You know, I mean, that sounds like a 9%. That sounds like 9%. You all knew that? You all should ask questions. And I could confirm it. So I have the information about it. Now, whether that was paid or not, we don't know. Right? That's what's going on. But see, that looks like around 4.7 million.
Hallelujah.
That's what it looks like. And I didn't expect that. I thought that this was something, you know, they say NGO. When you say NGO, I was thinking about something being voluntary. I think they were volunteering this, man.
NPO mean non-profit.
Right? That's what that's what I thought. Right, but Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wonder if any of those who knew about this. What they really paid this money? We can find out. I think, notwithstanding the fact that the Ministry of Social Service has oversight of food distribution programs. We advise that neither the permanent secretary nor the director of social services were consulted on the design and implementation of the food distribution program. It would appear that none of the well-established organizations were involved either, such as the Red Cross or major churches, who have many years of experience of food distribution and would not have charged anything for doing so. There is a complete absence of records on the spending of the $53 million. No standardized reporting of results, and two entities which receive collectively over $50 million have refused to respond to queries as to how the money was issued or used. Also, some entities were directed by the chairwoman to pay money to other organizations, which shows, at a minimum, the haphazard design of the program. So, Madam Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we were extremely surprised to hear Mrs. Holowesco Larson describe in the interview that the almost $2 million surplus payment to Hands for Hunger as an accounting error. Mr. Speaker, like I said, we never call any names, you know. I was just laying out some basic issues that are of concern that we're looking into. This conversation didn't have to be taking place. It didn't have to. But she says the almost $2 million surplus payment, she described it as an accounting error. Now, while the phrase accounting error may cover any multitude of sins, what we do know is that on February 17th, she said she knew of no organization that had such a balance in an interview with those persons she was talking to. Right. That's what she said. But we know when the entity that had the funds and returned it, they said that they had told her about these monies. So we don't know where the truth lies, but eventually I think that will also be known. You want the evidence of this? No. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't intend to yield. You know, this started off, Mr. Speaker. This started off, Mr. Speaker. Right? You know, this $2 million.
Members.
This started off as during the inquiries. During the inquiries, it was discovered that there was a $1.1 million. I think it's one. They started off saying that they had a $1.1 something million to return. Then they later discovered that there's a misapplication, or there's another accounting error where there's another $588,000 that was not properly booked, and therefore that 1.1 whatever ended up being 1.77 million to return. And these are the things, see, and still no questions were being asked about all of these things. Now, I understand that these people might be upset with me. Well, I'm sorry. I didn't intend to upset anyone. We only attempting to find out how the funds, we're trying to reconcile the accounts. And we want to be accountable because these are the people's money that's being spent. And had the competent authority, the member of Kalani, or indeed any member of the previous government, reported on their dealings as the law was required, these errors would have been discovered, and we would be having this conversation today. So for those who may be upset about this, it's not us to be upset with. Be upset with the people who ought to have done their job, followed the law, and then all of these errors would have been discovered, and we would not have been having this conversation today. Right? That's what it is. Do your job, right? And so, Madam Speaker, I therefore repeat the questions that I raised in my statement. Given the desperate circumstances of thousands of Bahamians during the lockdowns, what was the point of holding on to funds when there was such a huge need to feed people? And if the funds were available, why was healthier, better quality food not provided to all Bahamians? Just to be clear, we have no quarrel with Hands for Hunger or any of the other legitimate NGOs who were involved in the food program. Indeed, we called no names last week, and I repeat that, but this week we are responding to subsequent press reports. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, the underlying question remains, how was the $53 million spent?
One second. Is this a point of order? Yeah.
State your point of order.
But us not providing quality food. The food was broken down into completely nutritious carbohydrate, meats, and vegetables. So as individuals are balanced. In terms of meats, individuals would have received chicken, individuals would have received lamb, as in Bimini, received lamb. When they were receiving lamb, I myself wanted to travel to Bimini so that I could partake in the lamb. And they were receiving ham. In the case of Christmas, they were receiving turkey. They were all balanced meat. And the same thing as was provided, the vegetables that were available during particular seasons were likewise provided.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Speaker, if you say you feed me lamb, and I know I ate corned beef, do you think I can be persuaded by what you say? I'm not moved by the constant interruption by the member who seeks to justify whatever might be his case. But at the end of the day, the Bahamian people know what they got. See, they're the ones who told me, I wasn't on food, See? So, Mr. Speaker, that is, we know, and the Bahamian people know what they got. And we still want to know how the $53 million was spent. That's all. We just want to make sure it was spent. And we didn't know. And we, Mr. Speaker, there's so much more I could say, but I only thought I'll just touch those things. Because one of the things that really struck me, and I only discovered this week. I thought these NGOs, when they talk, I was attacking NGOs. I wasn't attacking no NGOs. This was a continuing refrain from me from I was in opposition to as I am now. In opposition, I was asking you to account. You were not accounting. I am now seeking to have the accounting done. And in that process, these are the things I'm discovering. That's what I'm doing. I'm not attacking NGOs. And when you talk about NGOs, that's something like I didn't expect anyone to be being paid to do this job. Everyone was saying, they believe, brave what people call me, say, brave what you're doing, attacking these people who offering their services to help the poor people and this charitable work. And I was feeling a little bad.
Big business.
I truly was feeling a little bad, I know that wasn't my intent, because it truly wasn't my intent. But then I discovered that they're making almost 10% of whatever they spend, plus $7,000 a week. And then a month. Well, it would not have been known had they not. It might have been found out later on, but not. I wouldn't have to bring it here. So please don't be upset with me. If they had done their job, when they ought to have done their job, this would not have been a subject of conversation today. Mr. Speaker, I also referred to parks and beaches. And I said it was a slush fund. And I still stand by those comments. The finance officer appointed, not the chairman, the finance officer appointed came without any previous experience. And he or she was made the sole signatory on the bank accounts. The managing director did not have any history of senior management experience. None. There was a complete absence of any internal control. The management of the authority have claimed not to have a specimen signature of the executive chairman. So they were unable to identify the true signature of the executive chairman of the authority. Large value contracts issued by the authority contained 3 distinct signatures, all purporting to be that of the chairman. Simple logic dictates that at least 2 of them must be fraudulent, unless, of course, the executive chairman authorized someone to sign the signature.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for
Who was
Kalani.
signing these contracts?
When an individual is making accusations of fraud, I would hope that such an investigation occur, because I myself utilized 3 different signatures. My bank signature is completely different from other signatures I use, and therefore I hope that the member would have done the proper investigation to make such accusation that there are 3 different signatures.
Yes, sir. Thank you, member.
Hold on. Did I hear? Did we hear him right? Did we hear the member for Kalani right? That he has 3 different signatures?
He under pressure.
Yeah. 3 different. See what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker? There's something called handwriting expert, There's something called handwriting expert. You could write 3 different ways, but you'll know who wrote the same handwriting. Some call handwriting. But you use 3 different signatures. Well, you. Yeah. Let's move on. The point here, though, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is large value contracts such as trucking and street sweeping were negotiated and approved without any technical advice. Some individuals received contracts for over $250,000 without having any infrastructure of their own. For example, they had no equipment. They had no employees of their own. Let me repeat that. Individuals were awarded large contracts to carry out work, but the staff and infrastructure were provided by the state. How does this make sense? What were they doing to deserve these contracts? And how does this make sense, especially at a time when Bahamians were prohibited from visiting local parks and beaches by the competent authority. I repeat, all the evidence points to the fact that the authority was effectively being used as a slush fund, with no attempt made to ensure that the services were being paid for by Bahamian taxpayers.
Especially around election time.
Yeah. Now, the travel health visa, we must not forget the great hardship that the travel health visa imposed on many Bahamians. It was an expensive burden for many, especially families traveling together. And there are many reports of Bahamians being stranded because of the cost or inefficiency of the administration of that visa. When the country in extended periods of lockdown and the borders shut, many Bahamians were also stranded abroad for many weeks. Despite this, at least 2 groups of foreigners were allowed to enter the country in circumstances that still remain unclear. One of those instances led to the resignation of the then Minister of Health, Dr. Dwayne Sands. Against that backdrop, someone in the Ministry of Tourism made a verbal agreement with a private company, Canoe, to set up the travel health visa scheme. Again, this was outside of normal public service structures. We still don't know who gave the instruction, who provided the link to Canoe, and why Canoe was chosen. But the result was that some $34.5 million of the Bahamian people's money passed through that company between November 2020 to August 2021. The company was allowed to set up a private bank account, again, outside of the public service, to receive the funds. This is in direct contravention of the law. They held on to the money for some 6 months before passing on funds to the Treasury. As the Auditor General said, 18 million. I'll come to that in a minute. As the Auditor General said in his report, in the absence of performing reconciliation functions in a timely manner, listen, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and the member for Kalani should listen. As the Auditor General said in his report, in the absence of performing reconciliation functions in a timely manner, errors, fraud, and or irregularities could possibly go undetected. We only have their word for it, that they have handed over all the funds. This may well be the case, but we have no evidence in support of that assertion. The questions remain. What was the connection between Canoe and the Ministry of Tourism that made them the beneficiaries of such a large contract agreed to after a verbal chat? Once again, I invite the House to recall the background to these events. At the time, ordinary Bahamians were being fined and imprisoned for even the tiniest breaches of the law. And yet, here you have the Ministry of Tourism operating with such flagrant legal violation. Since the change of government, many of the individuals and entities involved in these inquiries have sought to delay or frustrate our investigations. There are many questions. There are many questions that need to be answered. Rest assured, we will not let this drag on forever. If they have nothing to hide, people should not fear being
Point of order, Kalani. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
If you concluding already?
Yeah, sit down.
Man, I gotta be concluding already.
Yeah.
If the member, Mr. Speaker, the member knows there's the auditor's report. The auditor concluded by saying, during extraordinary times, government needs to be creative. Government needs to be flexible without jeopardizing good governance, and that we did. We managed $34 million. Nothing was missing. we were able to put a system in place that was able to deal with 3,000 individuals per day. No government agency has ever done that. None. And Mr. Speaker, we had to open the country, and as is in the auditor's report, we were concentrating on keeping the great name of the Bahamas internationally, and opening the country as efficient as possible.
Noted, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
The member, you see, if he had done his job, we would be having this conversation. He is saying, Mr. Speaker, that no money is missing. But we don't know that. We don't know that. And that's why the Auditor General said, let me repeat what the Auditor General said. He said that in the absence of performing reconciliation functions in a timely manner, errors, fraud, and or irregularities could possibly go in undetected. What that means? They know what's going on. They know that $34 million may have gone through the account, but even perhaps more than that could have gone through the account. Where that $34 million that they identified have gone through the account has gone, they have not said so, because there was a lack of reconciliation of these accounts. And we know where at least 18 million is gone. But we still have an understanding of why it went there and for what purpose was it used. That's all that is part of what's going to happen. So in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to putting all these investigations behind us, because we're only doing the job that they ought to have done. There will be truth. There will be consequences if the truth points in a particular way. And in the meantime, alongside these developments, there'll be a new path forward. I feel confident that better days lie ahead. I think about how far we have come in just these short 6 months. In 2018, the shock 60% increase in VAT put an immediate brake on consumer spending. Even before Hurricane Dorian and before COVID-19 pandemic, government borrowing and interest payments had skyrocketed. A series of bad deals, including Grand Lucine Hotel, were dragging us down. I forget Oban. Yeah. No, that's the no. I find the file, but I think about signatures. The file was that OPM. No, when I thought about signatures when I thought about Oban. 3 signatures. So I see why. I said we could have had a fiasco like Oban. I see why we could have had a. I can see why. So. And all this period, there are no major new investments in the country, not by major foreign investors, nor by the government. Now remember, billions were borrowed. Yet not a single new major road, school or clinic. What you say? Not even a house? You mean they built a house? Not even constructed a house. After Dorian. Even after Dorian, they haven't built one. And I was going to say something, but I believe that for another time. They might give me vaccine enough to say that one. But I'll say that another time. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are closing that chapter. I mean, writing a new one. We will continue to bring forward policies which are purposeful and compassionate. We have already done things which others said were impossible. A lot of things we have done so far, They said it can't work, it was impossible. And we're only getting started. We are only getting started. Because we have our faith, because we have our families, and because we have each other. We are building a new, inclusive future. And may God continue to bless our Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for St. Barnabas.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, just on a point of clarity, I know that the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador would have made some statements relative to the Bahamas Public Parks and Beaches Authority. No, Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador. I know. I just think it's very important. It's just very important to state this. In terms of the 3 signatures that were mentioned, let me just state for the record to this House and to the Bahamian people, no one has determined from the former executive, myself, if these different signatures of any of these were in fact my signatures. So I just want to state that for the record. I think that's very, very important. Right? So no one has asked me any questions relative to my signature. Let me just also say, if I may, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy, right? As it relates to the 2 positions that joined the authority, these persons would have gone through the human resources process, okay, and fully approved by the board of directors. I think it's very important to say that there was not any arbitrary system. These were approved by the board and they went through a human resources exercise. I will speak further to other matters during my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the member for Elizabeth.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, before I proceed into my midterm debate contribution, I just wanted to recognize the life of Carissa Culmer, who we understand was a victim of domestic abuse and made plenty public calls for help. And whilst I have never been a victim, I do have family members that also suffered domestic abuse. So it's quite an emotional experience for one to go through, and for the public to understand how important it is for us to have collective responsibility in how we respond and answer to these cries for help through legislation, through governance, but also through family, neighbors, communities, partnership, working together to help persons to get out of this domestic abuse. And I'm convinced that this administration will do all that we can to provide the level of assistance through legislation, through programs, through social services that we can within our power to assist to avoid any of these incidents occurring again. Deputy Speaker, I rise to second the debate on the midterm budget. Thank you, Deputy Speaker, for this opportunity to speak here today in my first midterm budget communication as the Member of Parliament for Elizabeth and as the Minister of Transport and Housing. I cannot continue without first thanking God for his grace and mercy towards me and for guiding my steps. Without his strength, I would not be here. Thank you to our Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Davis, for the confidence that he has placed in me. I thank my cabinet and parliamentary colleagues for their support and advice. To the Permanent Secretary, Ms. Antoinette Thompson, the Undersecretary, Ms. Gaynell Roll, other agency and department heads, board members, and the wider staff in the Ministry of Transport and Housing, thanks for the privilege of working alongside you. To my family, most especially my husband and my daughter, thank you for your love and support. My family is truly the wind beneath my wings. To the people of the great constituency of Elizabeth, who have given me the privilege to be here, I value your support and love. My driving objective is to continue to make a difference in Elizabeth and to make the constituency a better place to live and work. Deputy Speaker, the last few years have been trying times for the Bahamas. Yesterday, March 15, marked the second anniversary of the first recorded COVID-19 case in the Bahamas. Since then, Deputy Speaker, our country has reported over 33,000 positive COVID-19 cases and sadly, over 770 deaths. Beyond the direct human health and wellness impact, Deputy Speaker, COVID-19 has exposed weaknesses in our economic and social structures, resulting in a national crisis. It has been said before that the magnitude of a crisis is determined not just by the impact of the precipitating events, but also the fragility of the system that it attacks. At the peak of the COVID-19 crisis, Deputy Speaker, thousands of Bahamians lost their jobs and hundreds of businesses closed or suspended operations. Therefore, the need for economic diversification and the creation of resilient industries must be a top priority for our government. Under tremendous pressure, our healthcare system has been pushed almost to the brink of collapse. At one point during the height of the COVID-19 crisis, there was significant hospital bed shortage. Over 130 healthcare professionals were sidelined with COVID-19 simultaneously during a surge in positive COVID-19 cases in 2020. In education, thousands of students were reported inactive on the virtual learning platform, and while tremendous work and progress has been made in tracking down those absentee students, the impact of the loss of learning remains a serious national issue. I've highlighted these challenges, Deputy Speaker, posed to the economy, healthcare, and educational system, just to name a few areas of concern, because I want members of the public to know that my colleagues and I fully understand the complexity of the challenges that our nation is facing. The impact of COVID-19 is multidimensional and far-reaching. There is no one in this country who has not been impacted in some way. Deputy Speaker, crisis provides the opportunity to forge a better society, but only if we choose to make it so. The fact that there's a crisis does not, in and of itself, mean that things will change. It is up to us to leverage this reset as an opportunity for transformation. History is filled, Deputy Speaker, with examples of nations that have risen in the aftermath of crisis and those that were unwilling or unable to learn from the experience. We as a people will decide which of those groups the Bahamas belongs to. Luckily, Deputy Speaker, our leaders, the Prime Minister, Philip Davis, and the Deputy Prime Minister, I. Chester Cooper, understand the leadership that our country requires. Day and night, this cabinet team and team of parliamentarians is diligently working on behalf of the Bahamian people. Deputy Speaker, we debate this midterm budget at a serious time. Globally, the cost of foods, goods, and services continues to soar due to bottlenecks in the supply chain. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has assisted in driving the cost of a barrel of crude oil to well over $100, prompting fears that a gallon of gasoline can rise to as much as $8 locally. Our Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, and our able Minister of Economic Affairs are actively engaging the business community to ensure that increases in the cost of living are controlled as much as possible, and that our fiscal policies provide a safeguard to vulnerable households. Deputy Speaker, as advised by the Prime Minister in this Honorable House last week, the performance of the Bahamian economy has improved. The improvement in this economy has been largely driven by a stronger than anticipated rebound in domestic activity, which is directly attributed to the sound policies that this Davis administration has pursued. Make no mistake about it, Deputy Speaker. The elimination of the emergency orders and the associated curfew by this Davis administration has had a direct positive impact in accelerating the pace of economic recovery. To give honorable members a greater appreciation of the discriminatory nature of some elements of the emergency orders under the former administration, I wish to refer to the commercial water sports industry. Deputy Speaker, from March 2020, without justification or explanation, the former administration determined that the commercial watercraft sector should be closed. While commercial water sports operators sat waiting for the sector to be reopened, other industries were allowed to open. It was not until November 15th, only after the Davis administration came to office, that the sector was allowed to reopen. I recall watching a television interview by a local news station after the reopening of the sector, in which one water sports operator remarked, "Jet ski operators are elated, having heard the announcement. The thing is that a lot of guys won't be ready to go back to work right away because their jet skis have been parked for almost 2 years and the engines have seized up." While the prior administration stubbornly clung on to their out-of-touch policies, Deputy Speaker, businesses went under, and many were never able to catch themselves again, effectively turning temporary laid-off employees into the unemployed and throwing the lives of business owners into chaos. One of the best decisions that the former administration ever made during the pandemic was calling that early election so that we could come in and set things right before they did any more damage. And then there is this issue of their casual disregard for standard financial best practices and procurement procedures and the potential for corruption due to their slackness. Of course, they claim they have done nothing wrong. Does anyone remember when the members opposite swore up and down while in office that the emergency order did not have an impact on record keeping and procurement, and that this was the reason why they felt no need to report on contracts dished out? Now that discrepancies have been found, discrepancies that are suggestive of potential corruption, they find it preferable to say it was just a matter of slackness and convenience due to being in a rush during the pandemic. But can we all admit that to not keep proper records and follow proper procurement procedures is a dereliction of duty in and of itself? And that is the best case scenario here. The ongoing investigation will give us more insight into what occurred. Deputy Speaker, in this House, we refer to all members as honorable. It gives me no satisfaction, therefore, to draw the House attention to the comments reported in the Tribune newspaper last Friday, 11th March 2022, and attributed to the honorable member for Kalani. According to the report, the honorable gentleman was upset about the evidence the Prime Minister presented in the mid-year budget statement last week relating to monies retained by an NGO as part of the food program, monies which had since been returned. Deputy Speaker, the words directly quoted were as follows: "I can't wait to get in Parliament to bust his A and their A for talking stupidness." Deputy Speaker, as a member of Parliament and a former Prime Minister, I struggle to believe that the member for Kalani could have resorted to such violence language. In order that the stain might be removed from the honorable member's reputation, I would have invited him to distance himself from those remarks, and I would have yielded. But I invite his colleagues, if they wish to stand on a point of order, to distance themselves from those remarks if they wish to. I carry on, Deputy Speaker. It would also be helpful to hear him explain and defend the many omissions, incompetencies, and questionable practices described in the statement. Perhaps he has the answers that until now, no one else has been willing or able to provide. Or maybe one of his colleagues would be willing to provide an answer, although while in office, none of them raised an objection to anything he said or did. So I'm sure he could be fully confident of their continuing support. Thankfully, Deputy Speaker, the nation have now left all of that behind, and we are turning a corner. Deputy Speaker, as presented by the Ministry of Finance, total revenue is estimated at $1.1 billion, an increase of $453 million over the prior year. While total expenditure has slightly increased, we note that the variance of $3.6 million is not significant when viewed in consideration of the big picture. Our overall fiscal approach, Deputy Speaker, in the midterm is to focus on community-centered bottom-up development strategies for each island and community, expanding the orange, blue, and green economies, and promoting fiscal transparency and accountability. Deputy Speaker, I now turn my attention to the Ministry of Transport and Housing, which is comprised of the following agencies: the Post Office Department, the Port Department, the Department of Meteorology, the Road Traffic Department, the Air Accident Investigation Authority, and the Department of Housing. At the Ministry of Transport and Housing, my team and I understand that we must ignite and sustain a revolution. I want to send a clear message to the Bahamian people that we intend to deliver on our promises to modernize and revitalize the transport sector and create affordable housing solutions. Our greatest resource within the Ministry of Transport and Housing is our people. Therefore, I take this time to assure all public servants in the various units and departments across my ministry that I intend to continue to work hand in hand with them, as I understand that there's no I in team. The permanent secretary and the undersecretary in the Ministry of Transport and Housing are leading the charge to improve efficiency, prudently manage the ministry's financial resources, and instill a performance-oriented, team-driven culture. A critical part of achieving this goal, Deputy Speaker, is to have the right economic and social infrastructure in place to allow for an environment that is conducive to efficiency and productivity. My ministry, in reviewing the present conditions under which departments falling within its remit are currently operating, recognizes the importance of addressing the infrastructural needs that have been long outstanding issues. Deputy Speaker, while most attention has been focused on the current lease of the post office, we have been planning for a more suitable future. Postal services remain a vital and necessary conduit for local and global communication, but we must ensure that expenses are tightly managed. The main revenue streams for the Post Office Department are the rent of private letterboxes, the sale of stamps, and the commission on postal money orders. My ministry is focused on efforts to ensure the full collection of income and the avoidance of revenue leakage. Deputy Speaker, over the course of several years, we have seen a pullback by several banks in our family islands. In fact, some family islands are devoid of a commercial bank presence, which makes it difficult for commerce to be conducted. While our intent, Deputy Speaker, is to have the Post Office Savings Bank fill the void of a commercial bank in the family islands, my ministry recognizes the opportunity to review the operating structure of the Post Office Savings Bank to ensure that its services meet the needs of the family islands communities as much as possible, and that the appropriate procedures are in place as relates to standards of record keeping and accountability, as well as customer due diligence and adherence to anti-money laundering best practices. Deputy Speaker, in the budget for 2022-23, my ministry intends to seek an increase to the capital budgets for the Post Office Department for the purchase of tools and materials to assist with the swift and accurate sorting and delivery of mail. Deputy Speaker, port development is one of the critical infrastructural development gaps that need urgent attention, primarily because the Bahamas is an archipelagic nation and the ports are essential to the country's medium and long-term social development. The Cooperstown and Marsh Harbor Abaco port facilities are in dire need of infrastructural upgrades to create the performance of modern ports that would increase internal and external demand for port services, both locally and internationally. The collection of revenue by the Port Department is a critical focus. The collection of boat license fees is the primary source of revenue for the Port Department. Efforts to ensure the maximum collection of income is ongoing. As the Minister of Transport and Housing, I have requested that the Port Authority Board review the existing legislative framework to ensure that regulatory oversight is relevant to the realities of today and allows for the creation of opportunities that will only enhance our tourism product, but also generate employment for Bahamians. Deputy Speaker, mailboat services continue to be an important aspect of the transshipment of goods and services through our family islands. The mailboat owners and operators have not had a contract renewal since 2010. My ministry is now reviewing the 22 mailboat routes with the intention of adding a few additional routes. We will be guided by the population growth and the economic growth and development of those islands requiring additional services. For example, there is no established route from Grand Bahama to Abaco and Abaco to Bimini, but instead a tender service operating these routes. My ministry is seeking to add those routes to the existing mailboat services. As outlined in the supplementary budget, Deputy Speaker, over $8 million have been allocated by my ministry for mailboat service contracts. We understand that to operate a mailboat is not cheap. In fact, the annual fuel cost can be significant. However, as this service is government subsidized, the residents of the Family Islands should not have to pay exorbitant fees and suffer from inconsistent pricing. My ministry, Deputy Speaker, will seek to partner with the Department of Local Government, which falls under the Ministry of Agriculture, Marine Resources, and Family Islands Affairs, and Family Island MPs, to ensure that we give Family Island residents a voice in the decision-making process with a view to improving the mailboat services. Deputy Speaker, the Department of Meteorology provides an important service to our country. As a small island developing state, the Bahamas is especially vulnerable to the effects of climate change. In fact, Deputy Speaker, a recent report from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the most comprehensive up-to-date climate science findings since 2014, concludes that without human intervention, temperatures will increase, resulting possibly in rising sea levels and perhaps even stronger storms and hurricanes. Deputy Speaker, the Davis administration is committed to ensuring the effective functioning of the Department of Meteorology. While the supplementary budget included a slight reduction to the department's budget, the public is advised that my ministry will always ensure the consistent operation of the tools, such as the radars and other weather systems, that the department relies on to effectively perform its duties. On the issue of the Doppler radars, Deputy Speaker, it is important to note that the department is in the process of having radars installed and set up in Ragged Island and Mayaguana. Deputy Speaker, the Road Traffic Department was previously located in the Clarence A. Bean Building, Thompson Boulevard. However, as a result of changes with the structure and maintenance of the building, extensive consultations were held with various technical experts in both the private and public sectors in conjunction with the Bahamas Public Services Union, and it was determined that there was an urgent need to temporarily relocate the staff while seeking a more permanent location for that department. The Thomas A. Robinson Stadium was identified and has been housing the department and its operations for more than 3 years. It has now come to my attention, that the department has been requested to relocate with immediate effect. It is proposed, Deputy Speaker, that a new facility be constructed that would house the headquarters of the Ministry of Transport and Housing, as well as the Road Traffic Department. As my ministry has been challenged with spacing issues since it assumed responsibility for housing matters with effect from September 2021, which included the deployment of several of that department's senior staff to its current location in the Manx Corporate Center. It has now been determined that the ministry has outgrown its current location, hence the need to acquire a facility that would house the staff and agencies falling within its purview where applicable. Deputy Speaker, my ministry therefore invited expressions of interest from reputable organizations with the proven capacity for development and management of Cooperstown, Marsh Harbor, Abaco ports, construction of a general post office, and a facility to house the Ministry of Transport and Housing and the Road Traffic Department under PPP models. The construction of these facilities is expected to commence in 2022. A focus of the Road Traffic Department, Deputy Speaker, will be to give greater attention to the promotion of road safety practices. As the Minister for Transport and Housing, I am disturbed by the number of traffic fatalities involving the young people of our nation. I would therefore like to see the formulation of a national road safety campaign with high schools across our country. At this juncture, Deputy Speaker, I am pleased to report that the 2020 amendments to the Road Traffic Act has been finally gazetted. The 9th of February, 2022 is the appointed day notice. That is the day on which the amendment came into effect. Deputy Speaker, one of the primary objectives of this amendment is to stiffen the penalties related to vehicular homicide, drinking while driving, driving under the influence of dangerous drugs, driving with passengers and children unbelted in vehicles, and driving without a license. It is noteworthy that this amendment repeals and replaces Section 44 of the Road Traffic Act, Chapter 220. Deputy Speaker, the government has recently approved the lifting of moratorium on issuance of taxi and livery plates on New Providence, which was previously in place since 1997. With this lifting, the Cabinet approved the issuance of an additional plates to be included in the Road Traffic Department's inventory in order to satisfy the growing demand. Let me hasten to add, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, that consideration has been given to ensure that we avoid oversaturating the market. For the record, Deputy Speaker, the distribution process commenced with the compilation of a list through the combined effort of Acting Control of the Road Traffic Department, the Taxi Cab Union, and the Bahamas Livery Association. From the list, a decision was made to give preference to individuals who were in the industry for 15 years or more. Letters were subsequently prepared for issuance to selected individuals to ensure that it was a completely fair process. My ministry invited the Taxi Cab Union to provide a list of 50 individuals to whom it recommended issuance of the said plates. Parliamentary colleagues were also allowed to submit names of individuals to be considered for issuance. I am to point out, Deputy Speaker, that there's currently no moratorium on the issuance of taxi and livery plates on the Family Islands, but we are preparing to review that situation so that my ministry also can respond to the calls and requests coming in from Family Island colleagues. Deputy Speaker, the concern of the Surrey drivers have been brought to the attention of my ministry. I'm advised that as a result of the signing of the lease agreement for the Nassau Cruise Port and the subsequent construction, that Surrey drivers have been displaced. I wish to take this opportunity to assure Surrey drivers of my intent to engage relevant stakeholders on a plan to have them relocated and to ensure that their location is conducive to obtaining business from cruise passengers. The Air Accident Investigation Authority, Deputy Speaker, is a critical entity under my ministry. The authority is responsible for the investigation of civil aviation accidents in the Bahamas. This House would recall that in 2016, the International Civil Aviation Organization implemented new standards requiring that member states maintain air accident investigation authorities that are independent of the civil aviation authorities. Our focus for the authority is to ensure that we build talent and expand capacity in the authority through training and human resource development. I will have more to say on those plans at a later date. Deputy Speaker, one of the greatest forms of human empowerment is home ownership. Sadly, over the last few years and under the former administration, no progress has been made in creating and delivering affordable housing solutions. In fact, they built not one home. I'll repeat it. In fact, the former administration built not one home, 0 homes. And it is a sad fact, Deputy Speaker, that while some of our Caribbean counterparts have opened new public housing subdivisions, we in the Bahamas remain stagnant under the former administration. The need for affordable public housing, Deputy Speaker, has become so great in this country that the demand has far surpassed the current availability of lots. I am pleased to advise this honorable House that in less than 6 months in office, my ministry has broken ground on 2 housing subdivisions. Pine Crest in New Providence and Central Pines in Abaco. The Department of Housing, we at Belcourt and Pine Crest and foundations are being marked out in Abaco. The Department of Housing, Deputy Speaker, through its 2 housing fairs, so far have received hundreds and hundreds of applications from Bahamians who qualify and are approved by banks for homes, and we are working diligently to review and process each application. Deputy Speaker, given the great demand for public housing, my team and I recognize the need for the revitalization of the Department of Housing. Our focus is to transition the department to a relationship building and customer-centric format. For several years now, Deputy Speaker, the Central Bank of the Bahamas, through its quarterly banking lending conditions survey report, I'm wrapping up. Through its quarterly banking lending conditions survey report, has warned that primary reason for the decline of mortgage applications is debt service. Wait, this part is important. Let me get this to my people. The quarterly banking lending conditions survey report has warned that the primary reason for the decline of mortgage applications is debt service above threshold. In layman's term, mortgage applications have been declined due to many existing debt obligations that exceed the recommended central bank debt service limit of 45% of monthly income. Deputy Speaker, I'm asking for just a few more minutes to wrap this up, okay? I'm advised that due to repeated and excessive unsecured borrowings, that the monthly take-home pay for some persons in the public service is around $300. To be clear, Deputy Speaker, the intent is not to speak negative of the financial situations of some persons or instruct persons how to spend their salary. However, the ability of the government to deliver houses is negatively impacted by the over $1 billion in unsecured consumer loans owed by Bahamians to various financial institutions. Deputy Speaker, the Department of Housing must provide advice and guidance. This approach is reflective of the relationship building approach I alluded to earlier. My ministry in the next few months is expected to launch a home ownership education program or course to equip public servants with financial tips and the necessary insights on steps to take to qualify for a mortgage. By having the Department of Housing conduct this program, the department will be able to not only identify persons for public housing opportunities, but also seek to address serious national concerns. In the budget for 2023, my ministry intends to seek an increase in the capital budget for the Department of Housing for new housing subdivisions in New Providence, Abaco, Grand Bahama, Eleuthera, Andros, Exuma, and wherever else we can find some land to build. Deputy Speaker, as I conclude, I stand in this chamber as a result of the support of the good people of the Elizabeth constituency. My experience and interaction with my constituents have taught me that voters are tired of photo ops and flowery speeches. Voters are no longer prepared to wait or give chances. A few weeks ago, my constituency team and I launched the Elizabeth Training Institute. The Institute is designed to equip persons with the necessary skills and training to secure employment and entrepreneurial opportunities. Permit me, Deputy Speaker, to also say congratulations to one of my constituents, Diore Scott, who is on her way to Carifta and holds the record for the shot put 4th in the world in her age category. And we are so excited and proud of the confidence in Diore. To the good people of Elizabeth, I say stay tuned. There's more to come. The Ministry of Transport and Housing is prepared and ready to ignite a revolution. I again thank the team at the Ministry of Transport and Housing for their support. Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Member. As many, the chair recognizes the member for Central Grand Bahama.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, before I get into my the meat of my presentation, I do want to, and I know that we only have a half hour, but Mr. Deputy, I do want to start off by obviously thanking the good people of East Grand Bahama, straight from Proceedings Key, all the way to Malibu Reef, Coral Gardens, all of the good people of East Grand Bahama. Mr. Deputy, the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2018 requires the government to publish an annual fiscal strategy report to outline its medium-term fiscal framework, including economic forecasts, fiscal targets, and priorities for revenue collection and spending and borrowing. The fiscal strategy provides the public with an all-important economic plan and provides government's economic policies that it intends to follow for the next year. Today, we not only debate the midterm budget, but we also debate the government's fiscal strategy report. And this is the PLP's fiscal strategy report. What they have, the ministers have agreed in cabinet, the government has tabled in Parliament, and these include the fiscal policies that they deem we should be proceeding with. They have approved them, and they say these are the fiscal strategies, these are the economic policies that will move the country forward. So we debate that today. Government's budgets provide not just a report card of previous period, but it provides an opportunity to articulate the vision, the way forward, and make adjustments. So while we report on what the fiscal position is and what has taken place, we also would like to debate, to hear, to see, to experience what is going to happen moving forward. The people of the Bahamas also are concerned about what is going to happen moving forward. What are the plans? What are the policies? What are the strategies that we are going to be employing moving forward? On the budget performance, thankfully, we are recovering. Truth be told, we began this recovery earlier in the year. The fourth quarter of the last fiscal year, we saw revenue increase beyond the budget. The tourism numbers were also coming back. So we saw that even before July of last year. Well, we celebrate the news that we are continuing to recover. The very thing that we celebrate today is as a result of the economic policies of the Free National Movement. The very thing that we celebrate today is as a result of the policies and plans of the FNM. Mr. Deputy, the Prime Minister spoke to how well the recovery is going and how the revenue has improved significantly over the same period last year. He also spoke of the revenue being in line with the budget and that the fiscal deficit has also been reduced. So in other words, the period that the Prime Minister was reporting, we made more money than we budgeted for. We spent a little bit more than you budgeted for, but you're in line with the budget. And your fiscal deficit has decreased for the period that the Prime Minister spoke about. I also agree with the Prime Minister that the first half of the fiscal year, we've actually done well. The first half of the fiscal year, we've done well. I also heard the clap of the government side. And I wish to say thank you for the clap. Thank you for acknowledging that the first half of the first fiscal year, was the responsibility of the Free National Movement. This didn't just happen. It happened because the FNM were deliberate in buffering the effects of Dorian and COVID by spending $25 million to support healthcare, $118 million on unemployment assistance, $32 million on social assistance, $44 million for tax credits to fund payroll, saving 14,000 jobs, and $53 million through business continuity loans, and $260 million in concessions for Abaco and Grand Bahama. If we were able to provide the stimulus to keep things going through after the storm, through the pandemic, when we were open, when the economy opens, then the economy would be roaring back. Let me say that again to be clear. If we were able to provide the stimulus to keep things going after the storm and through the pandemic, when we open the economy would be roaring back. So thank you for acknowledging that the FNM was responsible for the successful beginning of our economic recovery. We will not let you rewrite history. The last budget, Mr. Deputy, we had put in place a number of programs. Remember, the last budget period, we are reporting from July to December. That's what we're reporting on. We're not reporting from September to March. We are reporting from July to December. The first 3 months of what we are reporting on was under the Free National Movement. But not just under the Free National Movement. We are moving forward and putting in place the plans of the Free National Movement. So, thank you for acknowledging that the FNM was responsible for seeing us through a historic number of tourists. As much as you would hate to deny, or you would want to deny it, as much as you would want to deny it, the Free National Movement was responsible for the period of time when we saw historic numbers of tourists in the Bahamas. Yeah, historic. And then putting us back on a path to achieve these numbers again. Let us be honest with ourselves. Everything we are talking about involves the first 6 months of this fiscal year, July to December. was as a result of the plan and mobilization of the Free National Movement. 3 out of the 6, the F&M was still the government. Mr. Deputy, we waited for the long-awaited PLP Fiscal Strategy Report. Quite frankly, I expected that based on the so-called disastrous economic policies of the F&M, we would have seen immediately this government introduce your own new and improved economic policies. Mr. Deputy, would you believe that with all of the talk about our bad economic policies, this government has repeated the same policies, and in some cases, copying the exact same words from the F&M Fiscal Strategy Report. You just can't make this stuff up. Let's take a look. Mr. Deputy, this is the F&M's Fiscal Strategy Report 2020. I have a copy of it here. 2020. This is the PLP's Fiscal Strategy Report. Right here. If you take a look at page 43, which speaks to first it lays out the different areas. So it speaks to what are your revenue strategies. And the headings for the revenue strategies are tax compliance measures, legal and administrative reforms, and tax reforms. Speaks to those 3 strategies under revenue. That's what your strategy report says. Yeah, the common titles. Yeah, so common titles. That's fine. Yeah. So under your tax compliance measures, you speak about strengthening investigation and intelligence capability to reinforce. Sorry, let me go back. The PLP's tax compliance measures strengthen the capacity to conduct investigations and revenue audits by institutionalizing the Revenue Enhancement Unit. That was under the PLP's report. Under the F&M's one, strengthen investigation and intelligence capability to reinforce the efforts undertaken by the Revenue Enhancement Unit that was established in 2019. You took out established in 2019. The PLP, continuing exploiting the use of big data techniques. The F&M, continuing exploiting the use of big data techniques. The PLP, continue monitoring and expanding the customs electronic single window, click to clear, launched in September 2019 to ensure efficient collection and maximization of custom revenue intake across the medium term. The F&M, continue monitoring and adjusting the customs electronic single window, click to clear, which was launched in 2019 to ensure efficient collection and maximization of custom revenue intake across the medium term. The exact words that you copy the policy from the F&M fiscal strategy and you put it in your fiscal strategy. Under legislation reforms, Madam, Mr. Deputy, they just I won't even read them because all they did was just copy and paste under legislative reforms and tax reform.
The chair recognizes Exuma.
Speaker, I am a little perplexed by what the former Minister of State might be saying or suggesting. If the member is suggesting that this administration ought to have discarded everything it met in place, that would be absolute lunacy. Government, as he well knows, is continuous.
Thank you. I agree with you.
During our campaign, Mr. Deputy, we committed that we will not be responsible government. And responsible government and responsible management of the fiscal affairs of this country is exactly what the Prime Minister is doing. So I'm not sure where he's going with this line of thought, Mr. Deputy. Any suggestion that what is being done is problematic, again, Mr. Deputy, would be lunacy. And I waited to really hear the direction that he was taking this, Mr. Deputy. But I am consistent.
One second. Yeah, one second. Thank you, member.
Mr. Deputy, the point that I'm making is, and actually, the member has actually made the point for me, that where we are today is as a result of the policies of the Free National Movement. That's what they are, continuing the policies.
The chair recognizes the member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Let me go further, Mr. Speaker, because I do not wish the public record, Mr. Deputy, right, to be rewritten, to borrow his words, by what he is saying today. For a long time in opposition, we complained that that administration and the office that this member held had disbanded the Revenue Enhancement Unit.
That's right. Now you get the name on the head.
If he is seeking to take credit for this policy, Mr. Speaker, that would be absolutely misleading. Because
That's it right there.
Mr. Deputy, they abandoned the Revenue Enhancement Unit.
Right there, DPS.
And we complained over and over again that it ought to come back.
Yep.
And we brought it back, Mr. Deputy.
Mr. Deputy, the facts don't lie, The facts don't lie. The facts don't lie. The report spoke to the Revenue Enhancement Unit, but we always denied that it was disbanded. We always denied that. There's the facts. But I don't want to be distracted. I don't want to be distracted because I got a lot more to say. Look under the recurrent expenditure priorities. Recurrent expenditure priorities. The same in terms of how we're going to spend the monies. What are we going to be focusing on in terms of spending, government spending? Here's what the PLP said. They're going to focus on.
Mr. Deputy, protect the speaker. The speaker can't.
They're going to focus on implementing targeted public expenditure reforms, continuing to limit the overall growth of the public sector, resumption of state-owned enterprises reform agenda, digitization of government services, reform of government pension. The FNM said we can limit overall growth in public sector employment, target review public expenditures, accelerate the state-owned enterprises, digitization of government services, and reform of government pension. Every single policy was copied and put in place and left in place. So, Mr. Deputy, the problem with what is being put forward is they are articulating that the policies of the PLP is now responsible for this economic rebound, which is not so. The policies of the Free National Movement, which...
Yeah, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Charlotte.
Mr. Deputy, on a point of order, the member is perhaps misguided because the same public officers. It's a continuous government. Yeah. The same public officers who would have written one report would have been part of the fiscal responsibility. The point to be made, Mr. Deputy, the point to be made is that in the speech from the throne, there were additional measures put forward having to do with VAT.
Yes.
That's a fiscal measure. Having to do with pension.
Yes.
That's a fiscal measure. Having to do with the payment of public officers. That's a fiscal measure. In other words, looking at the language prepared by the same people, because he concedes, as do we, that the government is continuous. Then look at those measures which were promised to the electorate in the blueprint for change, incorporated by the speech from the throne, and implemented from September to December and beyond. I mean, this is like
Here is the point here is another point that I wish to make, Mr. Deputy. Let's look at the heart of the economic policies that we were criticized for. And I want to take you to, again, a quote from their fiscal strategy report. Their fiscal strategy report says, at the heart of the government's fiscal strategy, at the heart of the government's fiscal strategy is the reliance on sound and stable economic policies to drive growth and to allow achievement of key fiscal objectives. Say at the heart. They said, so in essence, the main points at the heart. Here are the policies that they speak to. Continuing to support micro, small, medium-sized businesses. And here's what they say under that in their fiscal strategy. Appreciating the value of MSMEs to the Bahamian economy, government intends to continue providing of the $50 million per year, which they met in place, to further support growth of MSMEs. In other, continuing to support the small businesses. In July of 2021, the Securities Commission of the Bahamas approved the new crowdfunding regulation. All of these things were left in place by the FNM. The crowdfunding, I'm going to stay focused.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exoma and Ragged Island.
Please stop the time for me.
Stop the time.
Again, we may have met them in place, Mr. Deputy. We also left them in place. The SPDC, for example, he's talking about support for small and medium-sized business was formed under the vision and the management of the then Minister of State for Finance. His name is Michael Halkides. He formulated, Mr. Deputy, Do I have the floor, Mr. Deputy? Mr. Deputy.
Member, yes,
Mr. Deputy.
1 minute. Let him finish. Yes,
Am I
let him.
recognized?
Yes.
Am I recognized, Mr. Deputy? Deputy, am I recognized?
Yes. The honorable member for Exoma has the floor.
Mr. Deputy, I would invite the former Minister of State for Finance to go back to his library where he would discover that when Yefidem came to office, the SPDC had been facilitated through an IDB facility.
Okay, all right.
And there was intention, as was outlined by the then Minister of State for Finance, Alcides, that there would be a cooperation and a partnership with the University of the Bahamas, etc. Now, we left it in place.
Yeah,
They continued it.
Exactly. Well, ain't no bright idea.
And now
It's not a
we're
bright
carrying
idea.
on. Mr. Speaker, the logic is flawed, Mr. Deputy, and the member is misleading to the extent that he is seeking to take credit for policies that his government met in place. This is incredible, Mr. Deputy.
Very incredible.
The chair recognizes Kalani, the member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to add one clarity, and I want to take a quote from the Prime Minister himself, that I thought was very important, a quote. The Prime Minister himself said, "Much of the performance that we are reporting on relates to the activities of the previous administration." So what the Prime Minister is saying is their successes are as a result of what we've done. In his own words. In his own words.
Thank you.
Deputy, my time is running out, so I must move on. Here is where we do differ. Here's where we do differ, and here is what is different inside their fiscal strategy. Because the fiscal strategy, it speaks to economic policies, but it also speaks to economic forecasts. It speaks to what you forecast in terms of revenue and what you forecast in terms of expenditures. So in essence, it gives you a plan as to what the government intends to spend in the next fiscal year. Not just the next fiscal year, but the next fiscal years. It speaks to beyond. Here's where we do differ. I asked the ministers this question because this is your fiscal strategy and it was approved by your cabinet. In the next fiscal year, beginning July 2022, the government is projecting to decrease compensation to employees by $70 million. After making the promises to the public servants and the unions, we were stunned to learn that the compensation to public servants would be reduced over the next 4 years when compared to now. Is the plan of the government to cut public sector jobs, to cut increments or cut salaries, to further delay wage increases to public servants, even after the economy rebounds? The Fiscal Strategy Report of 2021, the PLP's Fiscal Strategy Report, lays out the Davis's administration's plan to decrease funding to local government districts by $1 million come the next fiscal period. Decrease the funding to education by $30 million come this next fiscal period. Decrease funding to the public service by $25 million. To decrease the police by $10 million. To decrease the defense force by $5 million. They also project that it will decrease funding to the Attorney General's office, the Customs Department, the prison, and the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Culture. This is in your fiscal strategy report. This is in your plan. This is what you've put forward. So we must understand, how is it possible that you can plan to decrease education by $30 million in the next fiscal period? How is it that you will plan to decrease the police against this budget? You can explain it when you speak. We are approaching an inflation crisis.
The chair recognizes the member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Mr. Deputy, I'm careful not to leave any notion of cutting public service salaries as may have been proffered, or cutting local government, or cutting this and that and the rest, Mr. Deputy. And the member ought to know that it's responsible when he makes these analogies to draw the comparison to what he's talking about. He's talking about cutting education. Schools were closed.
How much you spend on education?
Schools were closed, Mr. Deputy. Schools were closed. And therefore, there would have been less spending during a pandemic year.
You are missing the point.
There would have been less spending during the pandemic year. And if he is comparing, apples with apples, he would know that if schools are closed, you're going to spend less.
You are missing the
Mr.
point.
Deputy.
You are projecting to spend less come July.
Yeah, listen, hold on. Central Grand Bahama.
So
Just
member,
one member on the floor at a time, please.
remember, if he wishes to be responsible, would compare like with like, right? He would look at prior year and he would look at the restated numbers, which I suspect that he's referring to, and then he's saying, "Oh, there was a cut." The member ought to be clear about what he is saying, so as not to mislead, Mr. Deputy.
I'm sorry, but no. I'm very clear. What I am speaking about is what this government has projected it will spend come July of 2022. That is what I'm speaking about. And I am saying that your fiscal plan says that you will decrease spending in local government by $1 million come July 2022. You will decrease education by $30 million come July of 2022. Decrease public service by 25. You approved this. This went to cabinet. This your report. This your report. You should explain it.
Okay. Point of order.
Explain your report to the public.
One member at a time. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma.
This is outrageous, Mr. Deputy. The member is putting a misleading statement on the floor of the House, and he's asking me to clear it up. It's his point.
One member on the floor at a time, please.
When he mislead, he must clear it up, Mr. Deputy.
One second. He has the floor.
I am stating what's in your report. I am
Members.
stating what is in your report.
That's right.
This was approved by your cabinet, tabled here in Parliament.
That's right.
I am not making a misleading statement.
Members.
No, I am not. It is in here.
Members.
In here.
You explain it.
In here.
Your report. No, not at all. Not at all.
Mr. Deputy,
Continue.
25 million you are going to reduce. 25 million, the public service. 10 million, you say you are going to reduce the budget by 10 million for the police. You say you're going to reduce the defense force by 5 million. You also say you're going to reduce the budget from the Attorney General's office, the Customs Department, and the prison, and the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Culture. I move on. I have 5 more minutes. Mr. Deputy, we are approaching an inflation crisis. We are more vulnerable because we import most of what we consume. We also import most from the United States. In the US, the Consumer Price Index for February 2022 rose by 7.9% from a year ago, the highest level since January of 1982. Inflation grew worse in February amid the escalating crisis in Ukraine. The Consumer Price Index, which measures a wide-ranging basket of goods and services, increased 7.9 over the past 12 months, a 40-year high. Here is the reality. We see very little in this budget communication that provides hope for the ordinary Bahamian when it comes to dealing with inflation crisis. The food program, unemployment program, the gas prices, and in fact, you also intend to stop the surge orders come March 31st. The DRA has not provided funds since election. The Small Business Development Center, and you should say that on your feet, that the people in East Grand Bahama don't need it, because people in East Grand Bahama still need those funds. I call upon the government to do more than just consult, meet with, and hope for. I call upon the government to act. Mr. Deputy, this is why we were put here. I challenge you, and I challenge the government, that the Bahamas expects more from us. The Bahamas expects more of us. Do not go down the same rabbit hole chasing ghosts of the past. Do not be distracted. There are real people who are out there who need real relief. Mr. Deputy, a very easy thing to do would be remove VAT off breadbasket items. A very easy thing to do. Restore VAT to 12% on property transactions of millionaires above 2 million, and use the additional funds that you collect to help the poor. This was mentioned in the Fiscal Responsibility Council's report. They said this was fair and equitable because those who were rich were paying more, but it was reversed by this government. Remove VAT on locally produced food. Eliminate customs duty, excise taxes, shipping fees on certain items that will reduce the cost of food and goods landed in the Bahamas. You know, I saw a note just this morning. Barbados is looking at reducing VAT and capping VAT on their fuel. The Turks and Caicos is looking at reducing or eliminating their shipping fees to assist with goods and making goods cheaper when they landed. These are items that we could actually be looking at. I thought we would have been debating these kinds of items. I'm just about concluding. More funding for fishermen and farmers through grants. Backyard farming, increased backyard farming and community farming projects. Increase the amount provided for social services for food assistance, and increase the amount of people who are eligible to get it. Increase the amount provided for the school lunch program. Just follow the F&M's universal breakfast and lunch program that we had planned to put in place. Increase the amount provided for electricity assistance. And this is very serious. Increase the amount provided for electricity assistance. People will need it. Increase the amount of persons eligible for this electricity assistance, especially in Grand Bahama, where power is about to go up. And continue the surge orders for building materials. People in Sweetens Key still need it. People in East Grand Bahama still need it. People in Abaco still need the assistance through the surge order. Extend it. Mr. Deputy, people in Grand Bahama, people in Abaco continue to need the help. They continue to look to this government for the help. Unfortunately, We have not seen the help, and unfortunately, the people have not felt the help that is so much needed on the ground. So, Mr. Deputy, I leave it there. Thank you very much.
Interrupt the member for Central Grand Bahama. East Grand Bahama, I'm sorry. I was sitting right here minding my own business until DRA came into the equation. So I'll address the 2 points raised just briefly, because I will speak to this in detail tomorrow. On the first point of material, and the member for Central Grand Bahama, what he have said to me. East Grand Bahama, I'm sorry. He don't have to act as if we don't speak on these things.
Yes, absolutely.
With regards to material, Mr. Deputy, Mr. Stephen Burrows, an employee of the Disaster Reconstruction Authority, was in the US this week inspecting tens of thousands of material which relates to the home repairs that we expect to go to Grand Bahama. This is just a phone call we could be made that I could have explained that. Secondly, with regards to the help and assistance to those people who have suffered. And yes, the DRA's position was one of where we have not acted as quick or as thorough as we can. But I could say this, Mr. Deputy, based on what we have found by verbal contracts, and I repeat, verbal contracts to the tunes of hundreds of thousands that go into millions of dollars that we are on the hook for. It is hard for us to move forward when we're still trying to ascertain and pay down on some of those bills, of which that were not documented. And I will say no more than that until I make my address tomorrow.
The member for Pinewood, who has always been responsive, and so I do appreciate the fact that you have been responsive, and we will continue to have a cordial relationship. East Grand Bahama needs you, sir, and so I will continue to call upon you, sir. So thank you very much.
As many. The chair recognizes the member for Angliston.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, I have my communication or a presentation, and it's pretty lengthy, and I got to do it within the time frame. So I don't want to use too much time responding to the member for East Grand Bahama. I'll just say a couple of things. One is that I want you to be clear and understanding that the former administration has limited credibility in this country. And under your watch, you increased VAT, you caused for the contraction of our economy, it led to the highest cost of living in the history of this country. We are now learning you used a food program for people catching almighty hell, for millionaires to make more, and you come in here with all these great grand ideas about what you did and what we didn't do and how we adopted what you did. We're not adopting anything that you did. I heard the members talk about continuity. We're very different. We're very different. And the concepts that you refer to about the utilities and the public service and all, these are standard concepts that are from administration to administration to administration. And for you to come in this house and say an apple is an apple, when an apple is an apple, whether you're here, I'm here, or the next one is there, is ludicrous and is misrepresentative of the situation. And you know, I remember when y'all came in here and said the cupboard was bare, and you said all those things. And now we are learning the lack of transparency. The Auditor General speaks to it, and the abuses of the public purse. And so, you know, and don't worry about education, because education can have a real minister that will ensure our children will not fall between the cracks. And I can leave it like that for now. Because, Deputy Speaker, I am privileged to rise yet again in this honorable house on behalf of the people of Angleston, for whom it has been my honor to represent over these many years. And just one aside here again, people of Angleston, I was very closely monitoring that food program. They ain't never had no lamb, ain't never had no chicken, none of that. The bags were depressing. They were one-dimensional. But when you're hungry, you eat it. So I don't want the member to come in here and give some false perception. What we are interested in is not that you did not provide nutritious food for people who needed it, but that you use that opportunity to cushion, what's the word? Fatten up and pad for people of grand wealth. Anyway, I am humbled, Deputy Speaker, to have been invited by the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador to serve my people and my nation in the solemn undertaking of education in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I pledge that I will do all that I can with all that I have to pursue decisions, actions, and policies which positively advance the progress of our nation's children and our young people, and the prospects in general of the Bahamian people. The last 6 months of the Davis administration have represented an aggressive, focused agenda in education, which prioritized the mandate of getting children back into the classroom for face-to-face instruction. Before doing so, however, in anticipation of the positive advice from the Ministry of Health, we were required to complete the summer repairs of schools, which had been either lagging or at a complete standstill for months when we took office. Much of the work that was to be completed was substantial in nature and included schools such as Sybil Strawn. I wonder if they thought schools would ever open again in this country. No. Sybil Strawn Primary, C.W. Sawyer, Uriah McPhee, Yellow Elder, L.W. Young, Claridge Road Primary, Columbus Primary, Ridgeland Primary, amongst other schools throughout New Providence and nationwide. The Ministry of Education's team, the Ministry of Works team, and my brother is here next to me, Fort Charlotte, and the individual contractors, and I may add, the direct involvement of the Prime Minister himself. All in a display of an extraordinary, going beyond the call of duty participation, resulted in the professional completion of the various works. This was accomplished in an astonishingly rapid time, with all concerned understanding the critical mandate of getting children back into school for face-to-face instruction. The urgency of this mandate is underscored by the fact that thousands of children of all ages fell off the radar in a completely virtual learning environment in the last 2 years. And now we know from global research that the effect of this is significant learning loss, which, unless arrested, will have some severe impact on the individual lives of the thousands of children concerned and to the qualitative progress of our nation as a whole. It is a serious matter. To find these missing children, the ministry took a squarely pragmatic approach. A national multi-agency committee was formed comprising governmental and non-governmental participants tasked with mapping out a strategy for finding and bringing these children back into the safety net of education. In the first task, administrators, teachers, the clerical staff, security staff, janitorial staff, managers, union leaders, representatives from various NGOs, the Christian Council, and I might add even myself, hit the streets, door to door, in communities nationwide simultaneously in search of these young people. The exercise yielded the location and identification of almost 1,000 children who had been fully absent from school for 2 years. In our inaugural walkabout and launch of this initiative on 11th of January 2022 in Freetown alone, after a couple hours, almost 60 children were identified within that community. Within days of that walkabout, Uriah McPhee Primary School saw an appreciable increase in school attendance. This trend continued in various walkabouts across the nation. I reiterate, the commitment that relying upon our database and upon any other information received, we will seek out every child. We ask parents and guardians to work with us as there is no acceptable barrier that should separate children from a firm education. It is a human right, and it is their hope of a happy and decent existence. As a consequence of the committed and focused attention of the full range of stakeholders, and in particular the Minister of Health and his hardworking team, children returned to face-to-face learning on the 4th of January, 2022, including children who had completely disappeared from the monitor. 2 schools, however, experienced lingering issues, namely the Patrick J. Bethel High School in Abaco, with an enrollment of over 700 students, which continued in fully virtual mode due to teachers' shortages. The issue of teachers' shortages is a chronic and persistent concern. The Ministry of Education had already undertaken the engagement of scores of teachers, and the processing of this is underway through the Ministry of Public Service and the Public Service Commission, a process which unfortunately can be arduous and lengthy. In the interim, however, the ministry has been able to identify several supply teachers who will commence classes tomorrow in Abaco at that school, including teachers in English and mathematics, which represents the scarcity subject teachers in the nation. As a consequence, students at Patrick J. Bethel High will experience for the first time since October 2019 face-to-face instruction, which will commence in a phased manner beginning tomorrow. The issue of teacher shortages nationwide has been exacerbated, however, by the ill-advised policy decision of the prior Minister administration, which chose to defer the full teacher complement recruitment, leaving the system where it is today, which is severely shortchanged. As a consequence of this decision-making on assumption of office, we were mandated to urgently initiate the engagement and recruitment of teachers, almost 100 of them. That process, 134 teachers and teachers' aides, is now actively underway. And with the help of cabinet colleagues in the Ministry of Public Service, we hope will be shortly completed with teachers being dispatched to schools nationwide. The second school which posed challenges in opening for face-to-face instruction is T.A. Thompson Junior High School, where at a late hour, structural concerns were discovered on one of the classroom blocks on that campus. The ministry was able to move quickly in a matter of days to temporarily relocate all students to the University of the Bahamas campus, where they are attending as we speak in hybrid learning. This efficient resolution was achieved thanks to the concerted efforts of the president and board of the University of Bahamas, teachers, administrators, union stakeholders, and parents. I was able to meet with hundreds of T.A. Thompson parents by Zoom on 2 occasions in preparation for the transition, and I thank them for demonstrating to the world what it takes for the progress of our children. The potentially widespread learning loss phenomenon is a matter of major concern and focus of the ministry. The prolonged reliance on virtual learning or no formal instruction at all for almost 2 years has impacted the brains of thousands of children, resulting in what is now being described as learning loss. Just from the anecdotal reports I am receiving, the impact is severe in many instances, affecting even hand-eye coordination of young children and their ability to hold a pencil properly. The ministry does not intend to rely on anecdotal reports, however, to create policy and to develop effective remediation responses. To this end, an RFP has been developed and is now being completed with the assistance of the University of the Bahamas and the Ministry of Finance, which will be published within the next few days for the submission of proposals for a platform for diagnostics and, where necessary, a remediation program for each child. The main objective of this consultancy is the implementation of the assignment, which is necessary due to the very large number of students in the public sector who have been disadvantaged by not participating in the virtual lessons due to COVID-19 pandemic, which resulted in the suspension of in-person lessons in the Bahamas and across the world. The Ministry of Education and Technical Vocational Training also seeks to address the loss experienced by those students who have participated in virtual lessons, but who cannot function well on a virtual platform, and who instead require in-person lessons. In both instances, All indications are that those students have suffered tremendous learning loss, a loss which requires urgent remediation to bring about learning recovery. The ministry is seeking to close the learning gaps and recover learning loss by students attending school throughout the archipelago. The pursuit of this goal would include the assessment of students, training of teachers, and the implementation of intervention and acceleration plans. For those young people who over the last 2 years have been absent from school or who struggled on the virtual platform, and this is another category, the reality we must face is that many will not be returning to high school. We must therefore purposefully and deliberately coordinate across intergovernmental agencies and various ministries and in collaboration with NGOs to develop focused responses to avoid duplications and unaddressed gaps, to bolster literacy and numeracy skills and other skills to allow these young people to build esteem and confidence and to pursue employment opportunities or create paths to higher learning. The task ahead, Deputy Speaker, is mammoth. Our educational system was challenged long before COVID-19, but the pandemic has unleashed a furious crisis on us, which, if we are not careful, can be enduring. If we fail to step up, the price will be paid, and it will be astronomical. Already, I am hearing anecdotal reports that this 2-year fallout has led to many young people falling into harm's way, including alcohol and drug abuse, and worse. And worse, Deputy Speaker, especially amongst young males. But I say today, Mr. Deputy, we will never sacrifice our nation's young people. We cannot and will not surrender our nation's future to mediocrity and dysfunction and tragic human loss. We must fight for our children's future.
Yes.
I cannot reiterate more to the nation that what we are facing is not simply a Ministry of Education issue. We need all hands on deck.
Yes.
All hands. Parents must step it up. We must have community support from civil society. We must mandate it. Corporate Bahamas, we look to you. Church community, we call upon you. NGOs, we need you. This crisis is not isolated. And if we do not cure and heal the thousands of children affected by this pandemic, it will mushroom, mutate, and we will all be affected. As we reintegrate children into school and the socialization is resumed, we already see challenges emerging in several instances. And I want to say that violence, bullying, and all forms of antisocial behaviors will not be tolerated amongst our students. Parents, please, parents, Deputy, I say to the parents, please monitor and admonish and seek to improve communication with your children as you send them out each day and as they return home each day. The ministry is currently seeking to analyze the incidents that we have seen and concurrently devising approaches with advice to address and minimize such incidents. I wish to recognize the work of Superintendent Chaswell Hanna, the officer in charge of the Grove Station, who has worked closely with the schools in his region. We've also received guidance from others, including Dr. David Allen, and preliminary discussions with others. This is a complex issue, seemingly directly related to the prolonged isolations and pent-up energies. So this is another phenomenon that we have to deal with, and other negative external energies preying on young people. And this is yet another major concern that we should all be anxious to monitor and control, especially the parents and the extended families. While we have been actively engaged on many fronts over the last months in retrieving or recovering and remediating, I am pleased to announce that the ministry has simultaneously been engaged in forward preparation and new paradigms. And just in the last few days, the ministry unveiled its curriculum reform in the way of 10 newly revised and/or developed curriculum guides. The main aim of this curriculum development and reform is to ensure that greater emphasis is placed on the C skills of critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creativity. In other words, Mr. Deputy, to help shape our students into more than just a repository of stored facts, but to engender dynamic interactions between the student and her external reality, to encourage inquiry and thinking out of the box. The pre-primary curriculum, and I'll give you a brief summary, Mr. Deputy, on the reforms. The pre-primary curriculum brings an enhanced language development component to promote clear understanding and communication of thoughts and ideas to prepare children for grade 1. That's pre-primary. The primary language arts curriculum has been modernized to enhance general communication skills. It has included a greater degree of technology at the point of instruction and has increased the level of integration of other subject areas in the teaching of concepts and skills. This integration allows students to appreciate the connection to the various subjects they are being taught. So it's broadening the perspective. The revised primary science curriculum seeks to foster and enhance critical analysis by posing problems, asking questions, and testing hypotheses rather than simply accepting stated tenets. A new environmental strand has been introduced to include the study of natural resources, conservation, climate, and climate change. The primary mathematics curriculum, revised for the first time since 2010, has been updated to ensure that our students are given a solid foundation in number and operations, word problems, algebra, measurement, geometry, and spatial sense and data analysis. There is a heightened focus on connecting these topics so that students see their relevance and the linkages between the concepts. The brand new entrepreneurial skills curricula, introducing these studies in grades 8 and 9, will not only provide a solid foundation for further studies in economics and commerce, but will expose students to the nature of setting up a business, financial planning, and business acumen, with a view to creating a business-savvy citizenry. The computer studies curriculum, with its heavy emphasis on coding. Our children are going to learn coding. And app production of apps, which seeks to propel our students in the technological world. The office procedure curriculum's revision ensures that students will be exposed to the latest 21st innovations in the office setting. The former carpentry and joinery curriculum is being replaced by the carpentry and construction technology curriculum to allow students to acquire more in-depth training in the construction field. The civics curriculum, not having been revised since 1997, in addition to the traditional topics focusing on the features of government and how it works, now includes new topics such as multiculturalism, gender equity, social interaction and social media, to teach tolerance and respect for all.
Yes.
The biology curriculum, while focusing on traditional topics, now expands the strand on the environment outlined in the revised primary science curriculum, allowing students to embrace their important role as environmental stewards. Work continues on the revision and/or development of additional curricula following the curriculum development cycle model, and we anticipate a curriculum launch at the beginning of the new school year. Yet another curriculum launch. Of note in the curriculum reform is that a new Bahamian history text is underway with the collaboration of Dr. Chris Curry and the Ministry of Education and the Civics Division to be included in the revised civics and history curriculum. that is underway, and it is intended that through this history narrative, our children and young people will have a rooted understanding of their history, their origin, and their culture, and develop a sense of pride and powerful self-awareness.
Yes.
The ministry will begin a review and revision of the Bahamas High School Diploma, and I won't say much about it now. It was designed to certify school leavers reflecting basic competency in a range of areas, namely literacy, numeracy, workforce readiness, and community service. While thousands of students have received the National High School Diploma, thousands have not. The ministry is in the process of reviewing elements of the diploma that have unduly prohibited students from receiving the diploma, and to do so without watering down academic standards. In the interim, and that's at this time, efforts are being made to increase opportunities for credit recovery for our students, to ensure that students who face challenges in the earlier grade levels are given sufficient and appropriate opportunities to redeem themselves. And I trust that when the new school year opens, we will be having a different conversation about the diploma. I am very excited that the ministry is actively exploring a 3-year research project in secondary mathematics and science, which I hope to discuss in greater detail when we are in the budget debate. It is hoped that the methodologies deployed and new approaches of this project is undertaken. It will lead to a breakthrough in the learning of mathematics and science subjects at the secondary level. We will be known for our brilliance in mathematics.
Yes.
Suffice it to say that in this new day, we seek through our education system to stimulate and empower the brilliance and substantial capacity of our children and young people, who will ultimately be the engines of national progress and excellence, and who I believe can positively impact global progress. This includes what we hope will be an unprecedented developed technical and vocational pillar within the delivery of instruction, the creation of a tertiary institute for performing arts, an enhanced physical education curriculum, and greater access to tertiary education. None of what we seek to do can be accomplished without the full participation and commitment of teachers, administrators, and allied professionals, security staff, custodial staff, and of course, parents and guardians and the wider community. The proverbial village. It is not just a cliche. It's how we succeed. One team, united in love and service. To ensure that teachers as critical stakeholders are appropriately valued for their critical contributions, a committee has been formed to seek to empirically understand the issues which impact teacher morale and to create appropriate responses and policies. As we speak, a survey is being conducted, I think it ends in a couple days, of teachers nationwide to obtain the necessary data and feedback to inform policies and practices to enhance teacher morale. Associated with this is career path reform for teachers, but also to include guidance counselors, school psychologists, whose roles have become even more important in these challenging times, and our security staff, who feel overlooked despite their important function in school safety. The pending human resource issues, some for inordinate periods of time, are paramount. Issues such as confirmations and reclassifications. And to this end, I've been in discussions with colleagues in the Ministry of Public Service and the Public Service Commission for the expeditious conclusion of such matters, and we are on the same page. I pause at this juncture to honor the life and service of the late Dawn Culmer, who died suddenly last Friday. The contribution and ethical presence of this Miss Culmer was such that her loss has been a tremendous blow to her co-workers. In fact, there was grief counseling the day after, and to the wider employee complement and to the efficient performance of the ministry. She was an extraordinarily talented and hardworking and dedicated public officer. And I don't say that lightly. and she will be sorely missed. I extend condolences to her family, several of whom are, as we speak, similarly giving stellar contribution and stellar service to our country. Our children with special needs are front and center, and the ministry will have underway a review of what is necessary to cause for broad-based access requiring professional recruitment for diagnostics and teaching and classroom space for children with special needs. This includes recruitment of professional staff. And the ministry is committed to providing students with the opportunity to sit national examinations. I've been asked this question. And so the opportunity will be given in order to continue the process of opening doors either at higher education institutions or in the world of work. The national examinations are on schedule to be administered at the same time they were held last year. Practical slated for the latter part of April with the theoretical papers to follow. We wish to encourage our students to engage in preparation activities, including private study, but also the extra classes that are being organized by the teachers and the schools and the Department of Education. And Mr. Deputy, I think you see we are dealing on there's so many different energies happening, and we have to move forward in every way. In order to garner first-hand insight of the workings of each school nationwide, I have undertaken visits to schools across the country. So far, we've visited Abaco from north to south, Grand Bahama from east to west, and tomorrow for 2 days in Eleuthera from north to south, and thereafter into Exuma and Andros and all of the islands. And while we are one people, we are also diverse. And I think it's very important to understand the nuances of what happens in our schools nationwide. Mr. Deputy, I wish to speak briefly on the recent decision of the University of the Bahamas Board of Trustees in the selection of a new president, a non-Bahamian, which has proven disconcerting for many. I wish only to say that the University of the Bahamas, in the selection of a president under the charter, enjoys autonomy. That's the charter and the University of the Bahamas Act. That is not a decision that is delegated to anyone. And so I also know that the board has been very occupied with making decisions to cause for the university to attain accreditation and to become a stabilized academic force in the life of our country. It is also important to note that the search for a new president was completed before we took office. I must make it clear, however, that it is the policy of the Bahamas government that Bahamians be empowered wherever possible. And while we must accept the decision of the Board of Trustees, yes, if you can give me just not even a minute. Thank you. And while we must accept the decision of the Board of Trustees, we are confident, but we also urge and expect that in short order, a Bahamian will hold that prestigious post. I hope I made myself clear on that.
Absolutely clear.
Deputy Speaker. Well, we'll see and we'll know. They're taught, they have decision making. Look at the law. Deputy Speaker, we want our children to be activated, alert, high performing, ethically principled, happy, and proud. This requires work, strong undergirding of progressive policy, and national support of our children. I invite everyone to watch live tomorrow on Sunday, the Spelling Bee competition. Yes. I had the pleasure of meeting the regional champions last Monday. And I have to say, Mr. Deputy, what an amazing group of children. Humble, articulate, hardworking, disciplined, and brilliant. I wish to end. Andros and that? Andros and, yes, across the nation. So watch it on Sunday, Mr. Deputy. I wish to end by thanking the Minister of State, the member for Yamacraw, the Ministry of Education team, yes. Hardworking Minister of State. The Ministry of Education team led by the Permanent Secretary and Director, and all of the hardworking managers and officers, educators, and other professionals, parents, colleague ministers, and their teams. The Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Bahamas Christian Council, the Department of Social Services, BTVI, NTA, National Training Agency, and all others who have joined hands with us to save our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the member for St. Barnabas.
Mr. Deputy. The member for Angliston, I will tell you that it's wonderful to hear what you just articulated in terms of your view. Because just as you said, a number of Bahamians, thousands of Bahamians, most Bahamians are waking up this morning feeling that level of frustration, and some would say it's a travesty. Now, let me just say that I'm sure the new president, Mr. Rowland, is probably experienced and well qualified. But I believe that it's a travesty that at this point in our development that we cannot have at our higher tertiary education a Bahamian president, when in fact, it'll be interesting to see how exhaustive the process was, because we all know we can name about 3 persons who are Bahamians who are presidents of universities in the United States. And so it's very disconcerting, very disconcerting.
I just want to say that I appreciate your sentiment, but in fact, the choice was made under the prior administration. So
right, no.
So it is what it is.
No, but
it is what it is, and so let me finish. It is what it is, and so we just continue to empower our children to ensure that they can walk about the world not as interlopers or with hat in hand, and that they can hold their own. So I understand what you're saying, but we move on.
Yeah, no, that is.
Yeah.
Let me just say, Mr. Deputy.
Hold on, St. Barnabas. The chair recognizes the honorable member for.
Yeah, I'll just finish.
The chair recognizes St. Barnabas.
For me, Angliston and honorable members, this isn't about ascribing any blame. I'm just stating the fact that we have to do better as it relates to this. So we are all on the same page.
As many.
Yes. Mr.
Yeah. The chair recognizes the member for Central and South Eleuthera.
Yeah, that's a twin, right?
Yes.
Mr. Deputy, we think it's appropriate now for us to take the lunch break. So may I move for the suspension for lunch to return at 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Is there a seconder? Seconded. It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House be suspended until 3 p.m. today. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The business of this House stands suspended until 3 p.m.
All right.